Here we are, guys, in a late model JK with an LT1 10-speed. It's an awesome combination. We're just outside of Mesquite, Nevada, in the desert. It's been running about 113, 114 out here, but we're in an LT1. And what that means is we are just idling along. This engine is extremely mild. In fact, I can't even hear the engine. I can hear the fan winding up more than the engine. So this engine has excellent drivability and good manners. I'm going to be doing a video here shortly on a cammed LS that has a radical camshaft in it and a big torque converter, or a high stall torque converter. And it's probably putting out similar horsepower to this vehicle. The difference being they're completely opposite. The LT is all torque and drivability and mild, and that radical cammed engine is all about noise and RPM, and it has most of its torque on the top and it's pretty soft on the bottom. So if you're going to be out here in the desert just idling along with your air conditioning blasting, the LT1 is definitely an engine that you want to have. Temps are triple digit. We were 116 coming up. We are in a late model JK with that LT1 10-speed. I believe it's a 10-speed. It's funny because I just drove my Yukon Denali. It's a 17. And there are a lot of similarities between the way my Denali drives and this. In fact, the engine performance is almost identical. I'll say this about the LT, especially the 6.2 LT. I've never driven anything across the country that is so effortless. When we were in Wyoming in the high winds and the speed limit was 80 miles an hour, holding 80 miles an hour was completely effortless. And passing at 80 miles an hour, again, was completely effortless. And then we were cruising at 1700 RPM at 80. GM gears their trucks pretty tall. So the Denali is obviously in the luxury level. The Jeep JK chassis is not up to a Denali, but I will say that the LT engine gets it close. Because with a 6-cylinder and large tires on these Jeeps, they're miserable to drive. Not only are they rough and loud and get crappy mileage, but you got no power. With the 6.2 LT, it's quieter, it's smoother, it can cruise just as fast as that Denali effortlessly. And what I find with the LTs, actually what I find with most of our V8s, is they can cruise 70, 80, 90 miles an hour all day long. What really limits you how fast you can go or cruise that comfortably is your chassis and your tires. I drive Jeeps all the time where the tires are shaking and wobbling. And then on some Jeeps, when you get going 80 miles an hour plus, parts start flying off. You got light bars and visors and all sorts of things hanging off. So these engines can run at whatever speed you want. What's really going to determine how fast you can run is your JK. I get all the time, what kind of mileage am I going to get? Well, the Jeep I'm driving right now is actually getting about 17, which is pretty darn good when you consider it's got these oversized tires and all the mods that it had. I would say that's a little bit better than average. Usually with 37s to 40s, I'm seeing 15 to 16, and that's holding the speed limit, going up the grades at 80 miles an hour. If I back off, I can get better than that. And that's something you have to consider, because a lot of guys will say, hey, you know, I'm getting the same mileage now that I have with my V6. And it's rare to get less mileage with a V8 than with a V6, unless you drive really aggressively. But a lot of guys will say, hey, you know, I'm getting the same mileage, maybe 1 mile to the gallon better. But what they don't realize is they're going 20 miles an hour faster. They're cruising up these grades at 80 instead of 65, struggling. So the basic rule is you can expect better economy if you drive the same. You can expect the same economy if you drive a little bit faster. Now's not a great time to come out here to the southwest. It's pretty hot. The gorge is really an awesome place to visit if you've never been. The cost per mile of building this highway was extremely high. I think Arizona kind of got screwed because most of the gorge is in Arizona, and they don't really have much commerce here. Utah up north does in St. George, and then of course Nevada does down south in Mesquite and Las Vegas. So you'll see a lot of Arizona highway patrol in this little area here. Let's get a little update on what we're offering right now, because it seems to be changing on a weekly basis. We can do the LT1s and the 10 speeds. The 8 speeds are getting a little difficult to get right now. They are available, but GM has them on back order currently. We can do the L86 again. You guys remember the L86? We did those early on. We did a lot of them actually, more than the LT1s, because the LT1s were way out there on price. And since GM Performance has released the LT1, become readily available and the prices drop dramatically. At the beginning of this year, they re-engineered the LT1. It was mainly cam phasers and a couple of small things. They raised the price about $500, but essentially it's the same engine. So we got the LT1, we got the LT6, which a lot of guys say doesn't make sense. I think it's about $1,000 less than the LT1 right now, and it is a new crate motor. But the reality is we're going to end up putting an LT1 or an LT2 intake on it. So it's still less costly than the LT1, but you're getting similar performance. So you take your pick, the LT1 or the LT6. Some guys think the LT6 has more bottom end because it's a truck motor. Might be true, I don't know. These things have so much bottom end, I can't really tell too much of a difference. The big news is we can offer the LT 5.3 again, new in a crate. At the beginning of this year, I raved about it, and it is a phenomenal engine, especially with a 10-speed. I find that the 5.3 LT really takes advantage of the high gear transmission because, and that makes sense because it's a smaller displacement engine. Smaller displacement engines like more gears to stay in their power band. So now we have the L82 available to us. The L83 kind of went on the wayside. The L83 is still a great motor, but we can't get them. The L82 is virtually identical to the L83. The only difference, I think, is the accessory drive, because GM did fit a hydraulic power steering pump on the L82, so they moved the water pump to the center. So we can offer that again. Going down to the LSs, of course we can offer the LS3. Availability is still spotty. They're trickling through. We can still get them. So if you want an LS3, we got you covered. We also have the 6.0 LS, and thankfully they're available new again to us. They're either going to be L96s or LC8s. They're virtually identical engines. Only difference being the LC8 can run on alternate fuels. It is designed for fleets that run natural gas or propane or whatever, but it also runs on gasoline. So we have those engines available to us. Been getting a lot of calls on the LS 5.3 because with the cost of everything going up, guys want to save money. And unfortunately, I don't have very good news on the LS 5.3. We can still get them, we can still do it, but they're used wrecking yard engines. We have no choice, they're not available new any longer. The days of the $54.99 new crate LS 5.3 is over. So if you want an LS 5.3, we can do it, but the cost has gone up and you're going to be getting a used engine. So you say, why would you do it? Well, we got guys in California, and that engine is on an executive order, so they have to run a compliant engine, and if they don't want the 6.2, the 5.3 is still a good choice. As far as the transmission goes, if you're going to do an LT, get an 8 or a 10-speed. Don't mess around with a 6-speed. 6-speed is an awesome transmission, but the 8 and the 10-speed just have advantages at this point. If you're going to get an LS, we are now using remanufactured, and there really is no new 6 L80s out there anymore. Even the GM transmissions are remanufactured and they have a high core. I think the core value on a 6 L80 now is $2,000. So even one in a wrecking yard is worth $2,000. So the price has gone up to the point that we just buy remanufactured 6 L80s. On the 8 and the 10 speeds, of course, we get those from GM. The 10 speeds in current production, because those transmissions are in current production, they're not that hard to get. GM did make some changes in the later model, especially after 19. 17 and 18 transmissions work great, and that's really what you have to base the operating system on. And guys, that's true with the LS also. If you got a 7, 8, or 9 transmission, 6L80, you have to slave the ECM to that transmission for it to work right. After 2010, it doesn't really matter. They pretty much made everything work with each other, but in the early LSs, it was really important to match up the engine and transmission. Same thing with the LT. The 14 through 16 are basically the first generation, 17, 18 the next generation, and then 19 and above the last generation, right up until the L84, L87. Now what I find is that the early 17, 18 transmissions can work just as good as the late model transmissions. It just takes them a little bit longer to learn. And that's also true with the early transmissions. The 14 through 16s took forever to learn. In fact, if you ever pick your GM vehicle up with an 8-speed or even a 10-speed, they might tell you, don't come back and complain until after you drive it for a few weeks, because these adaptives need to learn. Even if you do a fast learn, even if you do a solenoid characterization, it still takes time for these transmissions to learn. But once they do, they're phenomenal. They're very, very smooth transmissions. You might notice a little bit of herky-jerky in traffic or downshifting on hills, but after you drive it for a few weeks, that all pretty much seems to smooth out. So let's talk a little bit about this Jeep. It's a typical late model JK with the usual mods, larger tires, suspension, the whole 9 yards. This LT1 pulls it like nothing. The days of struggling going up the hills and listening to the little V6 rev to the moon are over. Here's some advice. Gear your LT properly. We get a lot of Jeeps come in with 538s and they're on 37s. You're never going to maximize the economy, the drivability, the noise level, the longevity when you're spinning the engine up needlessly. So go back and watch my videos about what gears to run, but you'll find that you want to be under 2,000 RPM at 70. So expect a possible gear change with your LT swap to get maximum performance and economy. Now if you send it to us and you want us to do the gears, of course we can do it. We work with Adams here in town, and I think most of you know Adams Driveline. They're good guys over there. We've been dealing with them for, I want to say over a decade, but it might even be closer to 2 decades. We used to do Rubicon re-gears front and rear for $1,200. Those days are over. The cost of gears, the cost of labor, just trying to get the parts has become such a pain that you're going to spend more than that. As we are out here in the desert, it's triple digits. Consider heat. Now I know we just came off of winter, and just a couple of weeks ago we had snow in Heber, Utah. That's right outside Park City. And we hit in the 90s up there recently. And when I drove this Jeep up to Utah, it was 116. So make sure you take that into consideration. We offer an engine oil cooler. We offer additional transmission coolers. We have all sorts of cooling options. And yeah, the cold air hoods do help, but please remember, if you try to pull all of your heat through the engine compartment, that may not be the best strategy, because you got the AC condenser putting heat into the engine compartment. You have the radiator putting heat into the engine compartment. You have the transmission cooler putting heat into the engine compartment. If you have a turbocharged or supercharged engine, you have the intercooler putting heat into the engine compartment. I got guys that put power steering coolers up there too. And you're depending on this fan to pull all that heat into a high pressure area from a low pressure area. Here we are on another hot day with another nice Jeep. Pretty sure this has an LT1 in it. It's fast. Let's open the hood and see. Yep, here you go, an LT1. Got our battery tray in it. Got an S-Pod. Pretty typical build, it runs awesome. You can hear that SS fan winding up. It's hot out here and we got the air conditioning on because we're cooling the drone off. This is a late model Jeep and you can see the Pentastar cooler. That's a good transmission cooler. Jeep learned their lesson early on with a JK that with oversized tires these transmissions overheat. So in 2012 they added that Pentastar cooler. They kept the cooler in the bottom of the AC condenser, which was pretty worthless. It was behind the bumper. It didn't get a whole lot of airflow. The Pentastar cooler works great. This transmission's running cool. In fact, this whole vehicle's running cool, and it's a hot day.